episode 475 of Retro Encounter, RPG fans' bi-weekly podcast of many topics, usually of the retro variety. And I'm Zach Wilkerson, and I will be your host today. And we're going to be doing something a little different, but also a little familiar today. We're going to be looking at RPGs that were released in 1995. Sort of a year in review, looking at that. But before I get more into explaining that concept, let's talk about the people who were, I think all of us were actually alive in 95, although one of us barely was. Starting with you, Ben.
Hey, yes, I was 2 years old in 1995.
Stop. And Lucas.
Good morning.
Hello. And Mike.
Hello, I was 14 years old in 1995. I don't know if
Okay.
we're all supposed to be doing that, but there it is.
That makes me feel better.
Yeah. I was 10, so that's...
As was I. This is sort of a blend of a couple of different things. So those of you who have been longtime listeners to Retro Encounter might remember that when Mike Solosi was in charge of the show at the end of every year, just because he wanted to, he did a year interview episode where it would sort of look back at the major releases that came out that year. When I took over the show, we talked about it and decided that fit better in Random's wheelhouse, since they usually talk about more modern things. So Random Encounter will still be running that if you're looking for that episode. But I was thinking that I liked the format so much, and I was thinking about how I could make it work with, other years. And honestly, I just picked a random number 30 years ago, mostly because I thought it was repeatable. If anybody listens to the show and also listens to Retronauts, which I'm guessing probably some people do, I know Ben does, they've done many episodes that are sort of a year in review, and obviously theirs is much more comprehensive than ours, where they're looking at every game that was released during those years. But for us, we're going to be mostly looking at RPGs. One other quick clarification I want to give before we dive in is that the games we talk about, it's sort of complicated when we talk about like the games that were released in 1995. Well, especially back in the dark ages of, were we going to get a localization of some things, or where we didn't get localizations of some things? It becomes sort of a question of like, hey, like, do we use the Japanese release date? What if there was a remaster that came out a couple years later? So the way that I basically decided to do it, and I don't love the way it turned out for a couple of reasons, but the way I decided to do it was, if the game received a US or Western release date in that year, then we would do it. If that game in its sort of original iteration was never released in the West, I'm thinking about something like Dragon Quest VI, which we never got in its original form, then that also would be fair game for us to discuss. But then it introduces some weirdness, like Second Densetsu 3, Trials of Mana gets released basically in its original form like 25 years later. So we can't talk about it. So it's a little weird, but I couldn't figure out a better system for it. So does that make sense to everybody?
Oh
Indeed.
yeah. I mean, especially when we're only each picking two things. Like, if you cast too wide a net, it's like, how do you narrow it down?
So before we dive in, I know all of us were a variety of ages. I'm not even sure that I can ask Ben this question because he's not going to remember. But I kind of want to get a sense of where we were as gamers at the time, as people who were playing games, but also, kind of talk about, where we were with games in 95 and sort of our general impressions of that year at the time. So who wants to get us started kind of talking about where they were at the time?
I can go.
Okay.
I was living with my parents at the time because I was 14.
That's good.
It's funny, actually. One of the biggest things that like dawned on me in preparing for this is, in 1995, I apparently had no concept of the PlayStation, because I didn't actually realize the PlayStation came out that fall. Because in my world, the PlayStation didn't exist until Final Fantasy VII came out, which is when I got it. So I'm looking at this and like, wait, there were PlayStation games in 95? Because I was just purely on like Super Nintendo and Genesis at the time. So I was in that era, and it was Nintendo Power and Game Fan. I think Game Fan was still around at that time. They came and went a lot, but that was one of my favorite magazines at the time. Sometimes I miss game magazines, but A lot of good memories there. As for what I was doing besides playing games and going to school, I couldn't tell you because it was so long ago. See, Ben might not know because he was 2. I don't know because I'm just old. Um, but that was a time when we had things like Final Fantasy, air quotes, 3. I mean, I was really into RPGs then, between Final Fantasy 4 and 6, and then some games that came out in 1995.
Yeah, I think for me, 95, it was really from a personal perspective, like there was a lot of like family turmoil for me in 95, and I don't need to go into all of that. But what's interesting about it is that like a lot of my really distinct memories from 1995 are from playing games. And I was 10, and so I was just getting old enough that I wasn't just playing whatever games were available to me, right? Because like I had grandparents and family members who were into games, and RPGs were the genre du jour for most of us in my family. I was sort of at that age, and I'm going to steal something Ben said, where I had sort of infinite time and also infinite patience for games that weren't good, and which was really nice. There was something beautiful about that. And every time I got an RPG, I would get my hands on it, and I think I was getting to the point where I was able to sort of like work my way through these games, but I wasn't at the point where I was necessarily distinguishing in my taste about them. So there were more RPGs, and we'll talk about that, but there were still weren't so many that like I was gonna like only play like half of them that were available to me. I was gonna play all of them. But I also think it's sort of interesting to see how um where the genre is at that point, especially Japanese RPGs, and how it's sort of crystallizing into something. And this is sort of before the age of like a lot of experimentation, which we'll get into. But to me, like I think of this as sort of like one of the core years in my development as a player of RPGs.
I'm kind of in the same boat. I don't think I was seeking out as many RPGs uh at the time yet. I was dipping my toe in, and uh I am the oldest of 3. So a lot of my games were still like family, like platformers. There was a lot of multiplayer games. Um and there was a lot of shared screen time. We had the one Super
Yep.
Nintendo, and
You play for an
so
hour, I play for an hour. Don't
exactly.
erase my save data, please, I'm begging you.
And nobody else was interested in RPGs. So it was very much, if I was getting an RPG, I had to do it like I squeezed in a little bit here and there. I usually was just renting them, so I played 3 hours of a lot of different RPGs,
Mhm.
which is not great for the genre.
Did you just? I just had to ask because you're talking rentals. Did any of the games you rent were there ones where they had multiple copies of, and you're always like, "Hey, I wonder if I'm going to get the one with my save, or I'm going to start over again."
I I feel like they only had one copy of most of the stuff I was renting.
Oh, okay.
But there were times where like there are games that I saw the end of, not because I actually played through it, but because there was a save file that somebody had on there that I just wanted to see where everybody else left off at.
That's something I haven't thought about in a long time with rentals. Like just like seeing other people's save files and like just being like, "Well, what's going on here?" Interesting, very interesting.
It always drove me crazy because would always have weird names that they used, and then I of course was not thinking about the fact that my names that I was using might have been weird too. But I've always been a default name person where you can. So
I just always named them after my family members. That was just like, and it never even
Aw.
occurred to me to do it any other way. That was just like, that was the way I did it. And so when I would see like this wild stuff, because I didn't rent a lot, because again, my family members were playing these games. But when I did, I was like, what is that weird thing? I remember one had something about, it was like Drunk Guy was the name that he had. And he also was into RPGs, or she or they. And so, yeah, it was an interesting time. And yeah, I didn't talk about this, but like I never was like a couch co-op guy, but like I would always play like for an hour, and then my cousin would play for an hour, and then like we would argue about who's had more time. And so it was a very communal experience for me, and I experienced a lot of these games multiple times because we would literally play the exact same game, the exact same hour, like back to back over and over and over again. And I don't know why I thought that was fun, but I did. What about you, Ben?
Yeah, well, I have no real memories from this time, but I guess I could talk about like how I got interested in games from this time period later in life. So I would say like when I was in like college and um, graduate school, like before that, I had been really into like modern games and like keeping up with like gaming news and the industry and all that. And then around that time, I um, kind of I don't know, got disillusioned with a lot of that, and that's really where I think my love of like retro gaming and collecting and that sort of thing kind of started. Just kind of more investigating like the earlier things in the industry and kind of where a lot of the foundations of the games that I loved kind of started. And so that kind of time period in the last, I don't know, 8 to 10 years is really when I got into, investigating a lot of retro games. And so that's kind of how I would go back and play a lot of these older games from that time period, because obviously I wasn't, enjoying them when they were contemporary. And I think that it's like a really interesting way to kind of experience that, because it's like you have a different like perspective and different knowledge, but that you're kind of taking to a lot of these games. But I think a lot of them really you know show how much they, people talk about games like holding up and I don't really like that framing too much, because I think like games are a lot of games are really timeless, and what worked then and what works now generally is true. But it's just interesting to kind of revisit this stuff with that kind of perspective. I don't know if that I'm kind of rambling. I don't know if that makes sense
No,
to you
that makes perfect
guys.
sense.
Totally.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's kind of a good jumping off point for how we're going to talk about these games. So, obviously, we're going to talk about some of our favorites and some of the games that you would be familiar with. But some of the games, at least one of them that I'm bringing, is not good, or are not good, and that's okay because, like, I think that how I would like this conversation to sort of flow is to talk about them sort of in terms of where we were in '95 and sort of how we see that from a like going forward, but also like kind of coming backwards as well. And it's like such a particular moment, I think, in RPGs for how the genre. I think I've already said this is sort of crystallizing, but then how it sort of moves forward from there because this is pre 3D where things really change, and Final Fantasy VII kind of totally changes the genre, right? Um, so I think it's interesting to think about it as right before the zeitgeist really hits, right? Um, so how we're going to go through this is we're just going to all four of us brought two games. We'll talk through them, sort of our likes dislikes, sort of how we see the design philosophies of '95 working there and how that move forward. And yeah, that's kind of how the conversation is going to roll. Who wants to get started?
First game I wanted to talk about was Earthbound, because in addition to it just being a really classic RPG now, like as Ben was saying about games holding up or being timeless, I feel like Earthbound definitely falls into that. But it was so different and weird, and it really stood out at the time as well as, being with the modern setting. You're playing as a kid. There's a little bit more realism with stuff in a surrealist way. You're walking around with a baseball bat, eating burgers out of the trash, just like a real kid. But
I
it
don't know where
also
you get
did.
your burgers, but yeah.
I mean, when I was a kid, that's a whole different matter. I've refined my burgers since then.
I'll eat a burger from anywhere, so yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Even the trash?
Even the trash.
I mean, this isn't fair to say this since he's not here to defend himself, but he would, it is true. I mean, my brother ate a piece of Hershey's chocolate he found in a napkin dispenser at a fast food restaurant. So,
Oh God.
Oh my god.
it's not the trash, but it's like we don't know why it was wedged in there. I'm like, you probably shouldn't eat that. And he's like, okay.
Wrapped or unwrapped?
No, it was 2 bricks of it wasn't even regular just Hershey, it was Hershey's Cookies and Cream Bar, which, like, are only so good anyway. So yeah, it was unwrapped white chocolate just sitting there, and it's like, we probably should have stopped that from happening.
Yeah.
He
Ooh.
inspired Earthbound.
Yeah, I guess so.
Right. But yeah, I mean, it also did a lot of other, in addition to just the setting, it did a lot of cool things that I had never seen before that have become, I mean, kind of mainstays for the genre and my personal preferences, like the enemy encounters being on the maps, where you can like avoid them or get back attacks and stuff. Um, it had a lot of good humor to it, which is nice instead of just being this dour, serious fantasy story. Um, it did go some weird places, and I did not always understand it at the time, but that's okay. Um, and while I mostly rented this, I also love the fact that this was a game that came like long before there were like deluxe editions of releases. It came with a strategy guide and a poster and like this huge box full of goodies, scratch and sniff stickers. Um, so I just think that's a cool, I mean,
Oh,
it did a lot of really cool things.
it was incredible, and I've told this story on this podcast before, but I used to own that very thing, and I saw it in a game store recently, and I was like, "Oh, how much is this?" And I was like, "Oh, it's about $2,000." So I was like, "Oh, okay, never mind."
Right?
Lucas, yeah, I think Earthbound like is a good one to start with because I think of all the games that we have on this list that we're going to talk about today, this one is probably like the most like influential like to games today, like to the point that like it's like a meme, like, oh, another Earthbound inspired RPG about depression. It's like a meme that people like say online, and like there's just so many games now that are like extremely popular, like Undertale or um I don't know, I'm blanking on Omori, for example, that are
Mhm.
like directly inspired by Earthbound. And like for a game that was like relatively niche and really didn't see like a huge following at the time, like the impact of it is so huge in terms of just people who create games today or interested in games today, like even like a fan gamer started because those guys were making a Earthbound fan site, right? So
I mean,
there's
ROM
just so
hacking, I feel
much.
like, really, like, was popularized, I think, largely because of Earthbound too.
Yeah,
Yeah, a
yeah,
lot of, I
yeah,
mean, that was Toby Fox's first
Yeah.
project
hmm
was a Earthbound hack.
hmm yeah. And it's just there's so much now that is like huge and popular and like in the zeitgeist that is directly related to Earthbound and people's memories and experiences with Earthbound. So even though I don't know that, like a lot of people aren't maybe going back and playing it, but they're still like feeling the effects of that game and the impact it had on people with the games that people play today.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting too that like you said, it has this influence, but it's having that now. Because I don't feel like it had a very strong influence on mainstream games at the time. Because like the indie scene we have now didn't really, we didn't have one back then. But like seeing that that is still like influencing people, and we're getting games inspired by that, like so many years later, is really really cool.
Yeah, I
Um,
feel like it had more of a generational gap to
hmm
it. It didn't influence
yeah,
the other games that were coming out shortly after. It influenced the next generation of creators,
hmm
which
yes,
Yeah, and I mean, there's
is
some
cool.
examples.
Yeah, like
Like I think,
Moon. Yeah.
like Love Delic, for
Mhm.
example, like Moon. Like I don't think you get Moon without
Yeah.
Earthbound, right?
true, true.
But that's all very localized to Japan. I mean, we didn't get those games either. So I think it maybe had some direct influence in Japan, but the influence here was like very delayed. But then now, I mean, uh, I think from the games that we're going to talk about, this is the most like influential and important game to games today. Um, even more than something like Chrono Trigger, which maybe that's controversial, but I think
Oh, I agree.
I feel like we see way more games influenced by Earthbound than Chrono Trigger. And when we
mhm.
do get Chrono Trigger, it's Sea of Stars or I can't think of what I feel like Cosmic Star Heroine I think maybe made
The
some.
games it's inspired are not as good as some of the games that Earthbound has
Mhm.
That's the
inspired.
thing.
Yes.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes people try to like just emulate it too much, and it's like, well, but you didn't do it. Oh,
Mhm.
Setsuna. I thought
Yeah.
Setsuna was
Yes.
Yeah.
fine,
Yes.
but like they
That
were really
was
banking on like it's like
All
Chrono
of
Trigger. But
yeah,
all of
that's the
them were
problem.
fine.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that was the problem with, like, Tokyo RPG Factory in general, is that, like, they made 2 games that were, like, very much adhering to, like, the format of Chrono Trigger that just aren't as good, and then when their best game was when they finally, like, stopped doing that, and then
yeah,
they went away.
yeah.
So,
Which I guess
yeah.
worth saying, none of the games we mentioned that are inspired by Earthbound actually play anything like Earthbound, or
Yeah.
like they have a very different style. It feels like Earthbound.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, Lucas. It's more of a vibe or
Mhm.
like some of the presentation or the like storytelling kind of like narrative choices are maybe similar to Earthbound, but they don't, you're right, the gameplay or the mechanics are often very, very different. Yeah.
At least with the good ones. I mean, because I don't know, this might be controversial, but like Lisa the Painful, definitely inspired by Earthbound. It
Mhm.
it plays a lot like Earthbound in a lot of ways. I don't really like it either. So, um, but yeah, I mean, I think that it sort of marries these really, especially because we never got Mother, right? So it had felt where I've played the original Mother, and it certainly has a lot in common with Earthbound, but like at the time, it felt so distinct and different. And sort of thinking about it historically, like there's so many things about that game that are very traditional, right? Like it has Dragon Quest writ large all over it in so many ways, but the things that it marries this, sort of really odd, almost Lynchian vibe with something that is, in many ways very traditional, and it's so strange to think about, playing it at the time. Like I was like, well, this is different, and like you, Lucas, I was like, well, what's happening here? And luckily, I had that strategy guide. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known what to do on that final boss. There's no way.
I will finish this off with one little anecdote. So when I was a kid, I was renting Earthbound. This is one that I never actually owned. And so I was playing as much as I could and trying to squeeze it in. And I ended up playing to the point, and because it is that very familiar, feeling thing, where there were certain things that started to like blend together to the point where I was getting ready for bed, went to go brush my teeth, and after I brushed my teeth, I had the thought, oh, I don't want to have to do that again. I should go save my game so that I didn't have to brush my teeth again.
If only it had worked, huh?
If only it had worked.
I'm I'm definitely a late comer to Earthbound. I never played it when I was younger, but part of that was because my brother played it a lot. It was like, we shared a lot of games. We're only like 5 years apart. But like there were a few games that like I mostly played or he played, and Earthbound was one of his. So like I'd seen so much of the game at the time. So I guess maybe that's why I didn't play it much or play it myself until a few years ago when we got the SNES Classic. Still have not finished that one. I mean, I know what happens, but it is fun that I'm finally actually going through and playing it myself with someone who knows the game, so that helps a lot. But yeah, I mean, on top of everything you guys mentioned, like especially what you said early on, Lucas, about like seeing enemies in the field and stuff, one of my favorite mechanics it does, which I'm sure is somewhere in another RPG, but I always say like I wish this was more common, was the if you're severely over leveled, you just automatically win the battle. I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
it was so nice when you were like backtracking or something else. Um, just a really creative idea. And my last thing is an anecdote that isn't really mine, but it just happened last night. So I thought it'd be fun to share, especially with what we're talking about, how with like the game's lasting power and stuff. But when we Hillary and I saw the 8-Bit Big Band last night, and for the first time in all the times we've seen them, they didn't happen to play a song from the Mother series. Usually they play Foresight or something else. And I couldn't see this, but the conductor leaned down, and he always does a poll for, like, what console did everyone start with, and he mentions all, most Nintendo consoles and some others, and there was like 3 or 4 people that cheered, and he said, if your first console was the Switch, let me know. And one of them was this little kid in the front row, and he started talking to him, and I wish we could see him, because apparently he was dressed like Ness. And they're like,
Oh,
and it's like,
That's so
oh, so
crazy.
you must love Smash Brothers. Like, yeah, but also I'm playing Earthbound now, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Excellent.
It was so
Maybe the kids
interesting.
are all right.
Yeah, I was like, I wish we got to see him. I'd be like, I mean, I assume that might be some parental influence there, but very cool, and like totally unexpected to hear that.
Well, I'm sure a lot of kids are like, kids are obsessed with stuff like Undertale and
Mhm,
Deltarune and stuff like that. So I'm sure there's a lot of kids who like hear about Earthbound that way.
Yeah.
And because it's accessible, if you have Nintendo Switch Online or whatever, you can play it. And, so there's been other ways to play it over the years. So I'm sure a lot of kids just like discover it on their own, which is
mhm.
is cool. It's really cool.
Hmm.
Good. Well, I mean, yeah, so I obviously Earthbound hugely influential. But who would like to talk about a game that is potentially less influential? Anybody?
I guess I could do one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, I sort of feel like this is cheating, since we did a podcast earlier this year,
Yeah,
but
it's all good.
Breath of Fire 2, big one for me. I can't promise anything I say here will also have not been on the 2 episodes of Retro Encounter about it, but I really did. I mean, it really has stuck with me over time. On our last episode, we talked a lot about that one too. That it did a lot of things that I don't think I appreciated at the time. The town building, and just there was a lot of mechanics in that game, even though it wasn't perfect, that most people weren't doing. And I think at the time I took it for granted, because I'm like, I don't know, I'm just playing this game. But that was one my brother and I definitely played together, and it was a lot of fun. There was a lot of grinding, which was, I guess, I mean, it was common anyway, but I remember we figured out our best way to, like, grinding fish at the beginning of the game and other stuff to, like, afford the equipment, and somehow stumbling through the dialogue to, figure out what we do next. But yeah, I mean, everything, it was just a really great time playing that game and seeing the story uncover. And maybe our first RPG that we played that introduced the whole, like, God is evil concept. I know that doesn't show up in a lot of RPGs, but um yeah, no. And when we I think we all agreed on this too when we played it for Retro Encounter again, going through, like, some of those sequences, like where you, like, go into the whatever, the grand church town or whatever, like, some of it's, like, still legitimately creepy. So it sometimes,
definitely.
yeah, like, sometimes, you have those experiences as a kid, and you're like, well, I know it was really creepy back then, but I'm like, no, it still is. Even with their, like, sort of broken dialogue and other stuff going on, I'm like, they really did have something there, and, like, get the atmosphere down in some of those sequences. So,
I mean,
but
even the stuff right at the very beginning, like the the
yeah,
the cave with the monster tail that you have to follow with Bo, like that was a really creepy sequence early in the game, like playing it as a kid.
I think, yeah, the way that plays out with, like, the limited light and the tail, like, it really does capture that sensation of, like, a childhood, like, nightmare or whatever. Um, yeah, and then, I enjoyed the combat. That even though I wish some things were refined, like, I remember how excited we were when we'd figure out, like, different uh, shaman combinations to transform your characters and stuff, and how much we would never use Sten. Um,
Right.
Even
Yeah.
though he is a good character, even though he only has, like, this one little plot line around him, like, I did like that, but
Mhm.
he just was never in my party. But that's okay.
Yeah, I think Breath of Fire 2 is, we're talking about localizations, right? Like, obviously, Earthbound, which we didn't really talk about this, but, like, I think Earthbound is maybe the first great English localization. And I think that
Yeah.
that's part of its staying power, right? Obviously, the Breath of Fire 2 localization is not that. uh, but I do appreciate that it tries to do some interesting things, and it kind of actually goes through sort of an interesting localization process where it was just like some dudes who worked at Capcom, like it's like starting out, and they were like, "Hey, here are all these things. Turn it into interesting English." And they had like a couple weeks to do it with however many pages it would be.
Yeah.
But there's still like some. I said this at the time, like the localization is it kind of makes it all out of whack. And I think that the game itself is creepy and sort of everything just feels a little wrong. And I think that does some stuff. But I think that in a lot of ways, I think it's a very at times a very pretty game in terms of some of the sprite art and things like that. You compare it to some other games that were released this year, and ooh, buddy, it looks a lot better than them. And the auto battle feature I think is cool. The
Yep.
town building feature I think is cool. I think that the shaman system as you were describing was cool. Like the way that you get around on the map with different things, like you can roll around with Rand, or you have to use Sten to get across to some different things. Like it is trying to, in many ways, push the genre forward, but of course, it still has some of those very 1995 design flaws, like difficulty spikes and grinding and things like that. But I don't know. I
Or
kind of
not realizing you need one of those characters and having to walk
Oh,
all the way back to a point where you can change your party
yes,
and
yep.
walk all the way back.
the backtracking, not my favorite. So it is definitely deeply flawed, but in very much part of its time. But I also feel like it starts to push things forward in a way that is still better than, because we're actually going to see town building in another one of the games that we talk about where it sucks. But here it's still like there's some weird things about it, but like it's still cool.
I definitely didn't know you could do the town building stuff as a kid. That was something I completely missed until much later. I grabbed the just the very basic stuff you needed to do the shamans and to progress the plot, and I never recruited another person to my town.
Is this like the first like major RPG to like have that as a mechanic?
I mean, I don't know of one before that.
Because it's a thing that like shows up a lot. I mean, like Xenoblade Chronicles, right, has a similar thing. Like Octopath Traveler 0 is like entirely based around
Suikoden.
that.
Yeah.
Suikoden
Suikoden.
comes out the same year in Japan, but yeah, but definitely more fully fleshed out than previous games I can think of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's like a huge. That alone is like a huge contribution to the genre. Something that just keeps cropping up over and over and over again.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I mean, that was definitely one of our takeaways on our retro episode is like, there's so many different mechanics or concepts that they weren't perfect, but also like they weren't done before. Like they were like just winging it and like making this stuff up. So like when you think about it like that, I'm like, you can't be mad at it. Like, yeah, it wasn't perfect, but like the first version of something never is. Like that they even thought to do it is really cool.
Yeah. My first experience with this game was actually on the Game Boy Advance, because that was kind of my main platform as a kid. And one of the nice things about the Game Boy Advance is a lot of these like people just companies just ported their old Super Nintendo
Yep.
games to the platform, and I really enjoyed it. It doesn't. I don't think it stands out in my memory as much as some of the other RPGs I played at that time, like Golden Sun or Fire Emblem or things like that. But um, it's I really enjoyed it, and yeah, I mean, I think part of it is I think the localization really lets it down a lot. Like, I think, especially as a kid, it was very confusing, a lot of parts of it, for that reason. But I mean, it's so cool, right? Like Ryu and the transformations and just I don't know. Breath of Fire just has such a cool as a series has such like a cool vibe, and we don't really get
Yes.
anything
The
like that.
aesthetics have always
Yeah,
been one of the strongest parts of Breath of Fire to me.
yeah. It's so colorful and so like the animal people. I'm sure there was a lot of like furry awakenings from Breath of Fire.
Oh man.
But
Cat.
it's just such a
I mean, Cat
cool.
will do that or whatever her real
Yes,
name
yeah,
is.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's just such a cool universe, and my love for the series is more like 3 and 4 and then Dragon
Mm.
Quarter, but, yeah, I like the first 2 games. I think they're really, really cool and fun.
Three three is probably my favorite. Yeah, I mean the dragon system in that is really just so much fun to play with.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a lot of depth to that one,
Hmm.
whereas there's not a lot of depth to the system in Breath of Fire 2. It's like pull out your nuke, you have it once, the end.
I was just going to make a cheeky comment about how surprised I was at how many toilets you jumped down in the game.
Yeah, I remember playing through it and being like, I'm pretty sure the way I get out is through the toilet, and I remembered it, and I was right. It's late game. Yeah, I mean, I'll go ahead and go next. I think speaking of aesthetics, the next game I want to talk about is Lunar Eternal Blue. So the original Sega CD
Mhm.
release, which we got in America in 1995. And Eternal Blue is an interesting one because, in a lot of ways, it is very similar to the original version of Lunar: The Silver Star. But I think this version is significantly more successful, and it also, I think, then ends up having a lot of influence as it goes forward, right? Anime cutscenes, while
Mhm.
obviously we'll talk about another game that uses that a little bit, Eternal Blue really ups the ante on that, like, in terms of the presentation and really giving you, like, feeling like you're playing, like, a Saturday morning cartoon, like, of an anime that might have come out in the late '80s, early '90s, and so, the animeization of RPGs, I think you could argue is maybe not a positive thing in some ways, but here I think that because its presentation is so unique with the voice acting being, in my opinion, very strong for a 1995 game, not good in contemporary ways, very dramatic, but I think that it's really cool on that front. Really, that focus on characterization being so strong there, and again, like characterization being a focus of RPGs was not. This is not the first game that does it, of course, but and the Silver Star does it, but this ups the ante again a lot. It really gives us this like fully fleshed out party where the character interactions are really important. I think one thing that is at least true to the original Sega CD version that working designs messed around with a little bit when they localized it is the ability to save anywhere, which is really nice, even though you have to pay experience points for it in in the localized version of it. Is also, I think, really kind of unique and contemporary. So I love the presentation of it. I think that the presentation of anime aesthetics sort of really that sort of jumps off from there in a really strong way.
Yeah, I love this game. This is my favorite Lunar game. I've not played the original Sega CD version, just the complete version on PS1. But I like that it's a little more, I don't know, I guess mature than Silver Star. It's maybe not as like wholesome and timeless as Silver Star because of that, but I really love Hero and Lucia and their kind of relationship and how it develops, and just the cast in general, like Ron Farr, and um, just there's so I don't know, it's just such a great game, and I don't know, it just has a little bit more bite, I think, and weight to the story. I think it's also really cool how it like reapproaches Galleon, and like in context of the Silver Star, even though it's like so far in the future. It's just such a, I don't know, it's just such a great game, and one of the best, I think, like classic, like traditional kind of JRPG experiences you can have, and I think it just gets forgotten because it hasn't been as revisited as much as Silver Star has, which is a shame because it's great.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons I was so excited when they did the remaster that they included both, because Silver Star has been remade or re-released how many times now? I mean, it's worth it. I'm glad they do, but it's so weird that the sequel got left out time and time again. Um, I never played, we're talking about 95 here, so I never played the Sega CD version. I only played the PlayStation one, which I guess isn't that rare of a thing, but I really did enjoy it. I like everything you guys said, and it's I always appreciated that mechanically you could it was a sequel. It's in the you can tell it's in the same world, but it doesn't feel like it's just doing the exact same thing again. I think what you said about the tonal shift is really important. That doesn't make it feel just like more of the same, which more of the same of a good thing isn't always bad, but it's nice that it had that and feels distinctly different enough, but still with enough ties to the original. Um, and yeah, Galleon was one of my standouts too. Like I thought that was just a great repurposing of his character and really interesting. So I still need to finish the remaster of Silver Star so I can play Eternal Blue again, because I don't think I've played Eternal Blue since it came out on PlayStation. So it's been a very long time.
Two other things I want to point out is the epilogue. First of all, I can't think of a game previously that had, and it's very involved even in the Sega CD version, this very lengthy, like, 4, 5, 6 dungeon thing where you're going around the world. I think that um, it feels like it is still essential to it, but it doesn't feel like you necessarily, needed to play that post game to get a good experience from it. But it also gets back to, like, talking to all these different NPCs, and I know that Working Designs messed around with some of the dialogue on that, but like the NPCs are saying different things, and I know Silver Star started that first, but again, it's more mature. It kind of does a little bit of that church bad, but not totally. There's a lot of mystery to it, but also I think importantly, it was popular enough that it it helped create LunarNet, right? So from the history of RPGs, RPG fan is part of that, and it's cool that we're here partially because of that game.
It's one that I've missed, and I know of it a little bit, and but I think my probably my most experience with Lunar Eternal Blue was from, I believe, was from the old Retro Encounter episodes. So yeah.
Mhm. I definitely had some experience with it. I played the Silver Star story complete, and then I was like waiting for Eternal Blue, waiting for Eternal Blue. I was like, I can't wait anymore. But I didn't have any money, so I bought 3 different broken Sega CDs. And my dad, who has some electronics experience, put them together and created a working Sega CD out of it, and then I played
What?
Eternal Blue that way.
That's incredible.
That's
Yeah.
so awesome.
Yeah, it was, and I remember playing it in the summer, playing it late at night. It was just like such a magical thing, and I think that like the tone of Lunar is still so particular and kind of unmatched. I mean, Grandia is doing a little bit of the same thing, but not in the same way. And just like, I think part of it too is that like the series in general, but Lunar 2, it kind of shows that you can use these sort of more innocent storytelling techniques and things like that to tell an interesting and I think somewhat mature and interesting story. So
Mhm.
I think it's pretty critical to the development of the genre.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think game art's like you were saying earlier, Mike, and kind of what you're saying now, Zach, is like they had such a great way of like expanding upon and following up like their original, works with something that kind of is different in tone but still feels connected to the original. Like I think both Eternal Blue and Grandia 2 do a really good job of that. Like they're so tonally distinct from the originals, and yet they don't feel like so divorced from them, like maybe a mainline Final Fantasy can feel compared to previous ones. Like there's still there's direct connections, but also those kind of um, you know, tone and theme connections, but they tell very different stories and with different characters. And I think it's like they kind of mature, I guess, with the audience that they were targeting, and the ability to do that, I just think, is really impressive for game arts and something that you don't necessarily always see today. That level of skill with executing on that and like one franchise from one game to the next.
Yeah, no, I mean that Grandia is a great another example from that or of that. So I'm glad you brought that up.
And we don't talk about Dragon Song, so that definitely doesn't exist to us.
Yeah, the less said about that, the better.
They failed as they went forward from there, but oh well. Lunar 3 win, Lunar 3 win. So
Didn't Walking School or whatever, another weird
yeah,
spinoff, also come out in 95?
it came out in Japan in
Yeah,
1995. Yeah,
I don't know
It did.
anything about that one still.
I
uh,
played around with it a little bit. but Ben, I'm sure knows more than I do.
Yeah, it's I mean, it, like many a Game Gear RPG, though there are some good ones in '95, and I've got one to talk about. But it just is kind of like I think it's like targeted towards kids, and so it's just very simple and repetitive, and doesn't really add a lot. So I think they did a handheld RPG for the Game Boy for Grandia Parallel World Trippers, and that was a much more interesting game. But unfortunately, Walking School is just kind of mediocre.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean it's worth experiencing if you're really into Lunar. It's definitely a better experience than like Dragon Song, but it's not like a
Low
must
bar.
play. Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, it's a perfect time to move to you, Ben, and I guess we can talk about your Game Gear RPG.
Yeah.
I owned a Game
Yeah.
Gear, but I didn't own any RPGs for it, so
Well, I mean, that's the problem with the Game Gear is we didn't get a lot of the really good games in the US. And Game Gear is something that I've kind of really experienced a lot of more in just the last like 4 or 5 years. Going back, and I really love handhelds and handheld games in general. And the Game Gear surprisingly does have a lot of really interesting games. And there were a lot of good choices actually for '95, in Japan, like RPGs that came out. But I ended up settling on Shining Force Gaiden: The Final Conflict. And the main reason I picked this one is because this one, so the other two, there's three Shining Force Gaiden games on the Game Gear, and the first two were actually remade for the Sega CD, for Shining Force CD, and then they had like expanded scenarios and stuff. Um, and this one though is only on the Game Gear. And what's interesting about Final Conflict is it is like a prequel to Shining Force 2 and was made to kind of bridge the gap between Shining Force 1 and Shining Force 2. So originally Shining Force 1 and Shining Force 2 don't really have much connection to each other, but then this game kind of retroactively goes back and connects the events of the two games. Which is really interesting and I think makes it like worth playing if you're a really big fan of Shining Force. Um the game is very like the Game Gear Shining Force games in general are a lot more limited than the Genesis Shining Force games. It doesn't have the like town exploration and like the traditional RPG elements that the original Shining Force games have because I just think it wasn't possible in the Game Gear. So it's structured more like Fire Emblem, where you just have battle story. You go to camp and then you have another battle. But it's really cool, and it does a lot of things. I mean, this is really before you were getting like complicated strategy RPGs on handhelds for the most part, and it's as far as like the battle mechanics, just like a fully featured Shining Force game on handheld, which is really cool to see in '95. The Game Boy was not really getting a lot of games as complicated and mechanically deep as this game.
No, that's good. Like it was so common back then for the handheld version to just be like a light version of whatever it was trying to do. So that's
Yeah,
awesome. I didn't
yeah.
realize that it like tied the first two games together.
Yeah, yeah, it's like, you so the events, like, it has Max in it, though he's not playable, but, he is, like, uh, chasing down, uh, Mishaela, one of, Dark Souls, like, minions or whatever, and it takes him to, the world of, Shining Force 2, and so it's set, like, I think, like, 60 or 70 years before the events of Shining Force 2, but a lot of the, like, background or lore of what will then happen in the events of Shining Force 2 is set up here, which is really kinda neat, and you if you're a big fan of Shining Force, you've never played it, I think you can get a lot out of kind of that experience, getting a little bit of that background and lore of what came before. But it was made after, so like it doesn't conflict with anything, which is kind of interesting and fun when they make like a go back and make a prequel of a game that's already been made. So yeah, it's really cool, and it's very short too. It's like you can beat it in like 5 hours.
Oh wow.
So yeah.
Does it have a gopher?
No, but there are some like really interesting, weird characters in it, just like every Shining Force has.
Okay. As long
Yeah.
as there's some oddball characters, because that was something that I was always drawn to when we played when we were younger. I was like, oh, look, there's a non-human character. We need to get them.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a dragon man character. There's a robot. Yeah, there's all kind of cool ones, and a lot of characters that like feature in Shining Force. One or two that aren't playable. Some of them are playable in uh Final Conflict. So I think it's kind of it's almost like a fan service game for fans of the series. Um, and it's once they went to Shining Force 3, they'd like do a complete break with all the previous games. So it's kind of a send off to like the universe and world and characters of the original Shining Force games.
Oh, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I mean, I also I know we need to let some other people talk too, but I also think one thing you were saying earlier that you've played more Game Gear games more recently, probably because these days you don't need to have what, six AA batteries on
Yeah.
That was
hand
Yeah.
exactly what I was thinking.
that die every
Yes.
2 hours or whatever.
You were
Yes.
saying
It
5 hours,
through
and
those.
it's like, well, that's not that bad as long as you had the batteries to get through.
Mhm.
I mean, that's like,
Yeah, $20 in batteries.
yeah.
God knows what it was like in '95. Within in '95 money is probably like $100.
I think we still had rechargeable batteries. I know, Ben. It seems like
Yeah.
1995 was a long ago. It wasn't really the dark ages, but still, even if you
Still.
had rechargeables, they would take longer to charge than you would get out of them in a Game Gear. So
Yeah, that's true.
long process.
Play for half an hour, wait an hour.
Yeah, yeah. I guess we had one of those AC adapters for your Game Gear. You could plug it in the wall and
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
And it wasn't. I had one, but it wasn't very long. And I think the only thing I ever played on the Game Gear was like a chess game or something like that.
Oh god.
Like my uncle bought. Again, my uncle bought it for me. Bought me this awesome gaming console, and I'm like, well, there's no games.
Yeah, it was very dire, like US release games. Like for Shining Force, like there's 3 Shining Force guiding games, and we only got one, and it was the second one. So, yeah, that is definitely a big madness of the Game Gear. But now you don't have to worry about that because you can just find them however way you find old games, and a lot of them have fan translations. So yeah.
I wonder if we'll see Game Gear on like Switch Online at some point.
Yeah, it would be great. I mean, it was on the 3DS Virtual Console.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I fingers crossed. I mean, there are a lot of really unique and interesting Game Gear games, and because of like it this like especially in this time period, like 95, 96, there was a lot more interesting games coming out for the Game Gear than the Game Boy because it was kind of a lull for the Game Boy before Pokemon would come out and like revitalize the system.
Yeah.
So
Well, I have never played a Shining Force game, but it's always interesting to me to think about like how big tactical games were, elsewhere than they were here, and just like how much of a backlog there is of those to kind of go back to.
I was thinking the same thing. Like, that's one of the, like, I remember playing Shining Force 1 briefly, but we never had any, like, we were all Nintendo household, so I really didn't play any of the Shining Force stuff, and then trying to go back to some of them, uh, I I I didn't love the first game when I went back to try and play it, but maybe I need to go back with a more open mind and give it a shot.
I've forgotten pretty much everything about the first game. No, nothing against it. I just remember like
Yeah.
we played the second one much more. Not sure I ever finished it, but I did enjoy it a lot. It had I mean, maybe the first one had this too, but we probably didn't play long enough. But at the time, I know one of our things, and maybe this ties back to the transformations in Breath of Fire. And I mean, it's just like there's something about like the visual, like they were promotions, right, in Shining Force 2. The idea of like you like upgrading to a new, a better class was always a neat little thing that we like tried to earn.
mhm. Yeah, no, that's something they got from Fire Emblem.
Hmm.
But of course, we wouldn't have known about that. So that's like really your first like Western experience with that idea of like units promoting and changing class and getting like stat increases and new portrait and new like sprite and battle and stuff. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, that's a really cool thing. It's always like too like when do you promote? That's a big argument in the Shining Force community
Oh,
of like,
sure.
yeah, to min max your characters, right? So
Your protagonist did get basically a lightsaber when he promoted, right? That wasn't just like what
mm,
I'm remembering as from a kid.
yeah, kinda, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Excellent. Well, Lucas, you just said that you were a Nintendo only kid, but I think that you might have a game to bring that is not Nintendo.
This is true. This is not a game I played in 1995, definitely. But it is a game that I have grown to love and gone back to. And one of the things that actually made, even going back, there's something about Sega games that's never always sat well with me. It's something about the sound chip or the way the graphics are set up just doesn't quite click with me because of my Nintendo ness. And Fantasy Star 4 has always been kind of the exception to that, just because it is such a well made game. And it's got great music, it's got some really interesting design with the storytelling, the like comic panel thing that it does. That I feel like there are obviously other games that did that before, but it's not something that we see in a lot of RPGs. Like I'm thinking like even like Ninja Gaiden, way back in the day did that, but that was not something that RPGs took and ran with for some reason, even though they're very story focused. Um, and yeah, and kind of tying in a little bit with my first choice as well, like it did something that to me was very different of, you know, using a sci-fi setting and exploring planets and doing all this other like exploration, which in retrospect it's also the fourth game in the series, so it's not like it's the first to do that, but um it was also kind of the capstone for that series, which is uh just cool as well as far as gaming history goes. I can't think of a lot of other games that had that. Well, obviously, I guess Shining Force Gaiden aside, um, it's like it really was a capstone that finished the story that the first Fantasy Star games did as well, which I think is something that we hadn't really seen before in that way of like four long games being tied together and having a complete story being told.
Mhm. Yeah, and Phantasy Star 4 like has the most connections to Phantasy Star 1. And I think like Phantasy Star 4 I love Phantasy Star and I think Phantasy Star 4 is the best game in the series and Phantasy Star 1 is like the second best game in the series, and so having them be
Yeah,
connected like
two
that, I
is
think.
basically unplayable in my opinion.
Well, yeah, I mean, 2 I like 2 alright, I think 3 is the worst one, and 3 takes a lot of departures too from the other games, but 4 was kind of a, return to form for the series, and, I mean, I think Phantasy Star 4 can rival pretty much any RPG on the Super Nintendo, like, it is really that good, and
Yes.
people don't really think of the Genesis as a powerhouse for RPGs, but Phantasy Star 4 is just an amazing, amazing game. And it was also I think it might have been the first director job for Reiko Kodama, this
I
game,
believe so.
and
Yeah.
she, obviously is a huge figure in RPGs. And particularly for Skies of Arcadia and some of the other games she'd make later. But this kind of really established her to be like a huge force in RPGs, and I think it's important for that reason too. But yeah, I love this game, and everything you said, Lucas, is so true. I think if Phantasy Star 2 and 3, whatever, you can take or leave. But I think anybody who's really into RPGs but hasn't really explored the Sega side has got to play Phantasy Star 1 and Phantasy Star 4. They're just so influential and such amazing games, especially for the time that they released.
I'm trying. Not as hard as I could be. It Fantasy Star and Dragon Quest are unfortunately two I just don't have enough experience with. And I know many of you will probably tell me, well, just play X, play this one, play that one. Like, I'm sure I could just go and play Dragon Quest 8 or 11, and that would be a good place to start. But I'm too, like, I still want to see where this stuff came from or where it started. And I do the same thing with Fantasy Star. No matter how many people tell me I should just play 4, I'm like, knowing what people say about 2 and 3, it'll make playing 2 and 3 after harder. So so far, well, whether or not it's working, I'm trying to play in order. I really, really liked the first Fantasy Star. I never played the original, but I played the Ages version on Switch.
It's a
Which,
great version.
yeah, I mean, like, it just has enough like quality of life where you don't have to waste too much time grinding or whatever. Like, I don't feel like it really takes anything away from it. I thought the remixed music is also really good. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. I wish those versions existed for 2 and 3, because I went from the Ages version of 1 to just the straight up original 2. And when you're getting into a random encounter every other step, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I can do this.
I think
uh,
there is an Ages version of 2 that was released on the PlayStation 2, and I think there's a fan translation of that. So you might try that version.
is that Ages or is
Um,
that the Generation 2
or
game?
Generation, that's what it is. Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Yeah,
that's correct.
those I have not played. But anyway, I'd like to at some point. Like, I mean, I hear so much good about 4, and
I've,
I enjoyed the first one enough that maybe I should just go from 1 to 4 and leave it. And
I
if I'm bored one day, I'll play 2 and 3.
I have tried I've played, like, made a concerted effort on 2 and 3 several times, and I have never finished them. So I'm kind of in the same boat there. Like, 4 is the main dish that you came for. Like, there's no reason to play Lufia 1.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've played Phantasy Star 1 and I like it a lot, but like to me 4 is really like a like a mixture of like some of the interesting things that Phantasy Star was already doing. I think that the storytelling was kind of elevated in Phantasy Star, even starting with 1. I think 2 story is actually quite good. But it obviously there are things that are rough around the edges with it, whereas 4 turns it into like a fully formed experience. But I always think that the thing about Phantasy Star 4 in particular, besides the graphic panels, which I think are really powerful, as you noted, but also like the willingness to do certain things to characters. I'll say that, which again, it's not exclusive to Phantasy Star 4, but the setting and like how it's so much of so many RPGs, very traditional setting, and obviously Sega is struggling to sort of make Phantasy Star accessible to people for a long time, but like giving like sort of that sci-fi setting that's very particular and unique, and like showing that that can be successful in sort of a mainstream accessibility way, I think is one of the most important things that Phantasy Star gives us sort of moving forward from there.
I also want to say, just mechanically, there's a ton of cool things that Fantasy Star 4 did that we really don't see very often, or like the macro system where you could pre-plan like certain battle patterns that you wanted to do repeatedly, or the combos where, I mean, obviously there are other games that did combo techniques as well, but I would almost argue that Fantasy Stars are more interactive, like they're more flexible than a lot of other combo systems for characters, where you can like, mix and match any air spell plus any fire spell to get this bonus or stuff. Um, which I definitely did not know the first times I played it. Uh, but going back and actually digging into it, because the game does not explain any of these things well, but the hidden mechanics that are there, or the depth of mechanics are there, if you put the time and effort in and mess around with it, or look at a guide.
My problem was always like the character limits, which we haven't talked about a lot, but that impacted a lot of impacted a lot of games at the time. And the spell names were like there were like what 3 letters, and
Yes.
3 letters that I have no idea what they mean. So I had to have like a Google Doc or a Google Doc or something open next to me to like be like, oh, this is what these spells actually mean.
Okay, that's fair.
I
That
mean,
is
it's not
also
it's not
fair.
a criticism. It's just character limits being
Oh yeah.
such a thing of 1995, and I think that is probably my biggest criticism of that game is like I don't know what these spells do.
On one hand, I totally agree that that is a consistent problem, not just in Fantasy Star, but in RPGs. uh, because that's always been one of the things. Like, you could say the same thing about Persona. You could say the same thing about what was even like Dragon Quest. The names for some of the spells just get like don't actually tell you what they do,
Yeah.
unless
Or
you are
Breath
familiar
of
with the
Fire
series.
2, like we just talked about, Breath of Fire 2 has that problem. Like a
Yeah.
serious problem with the character limit, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know this is like spell character limits and not character limit, like character name limits, but a minor throwback when I was talking about like video game magazines at the time, I remember how much of a fuss that some people at on Game Fan magazine made about how Square adjusted the character limits for Final Fantasy VII during localization to be able to fit the full names of characters. And I was like, well, that sounds interesting, but I don't think at the time I had thought about how limited things were. I just got used to them, you know. It's like, oh yes, every character has to be, 4 or 5 letters long.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was trying to think. I was going to make some joke about a Fantasy Star spell name, but I can't even think of any of them. Like, how do you not know that Zeo is lightning, or but I don't remember what they all are. And I
Actually,
played.
that sounds right.
I
I was
mean,
trying to say, I
maybe
think that's
I
I
played.
think Watt is lightning.
Oh,
Ah.
I played Fantasy Star One. Semi recently, but at the time I played a lot of Fantasy Star Online. But I still don't
Yes.
remember all the names names of these things.
Also, I was wrong. Watt is ice.
Oh,
Oh, that
you,
makes sense.
you
Logical.
proved you
Yeah.
proved your
Yeah.
point.
Well, another game that struggles with character limits and just about everything else. A game that probably a lot of listeners have not played, and that's the correct choice, is Tecmo Secret of the Stars. Which, interestingly, I played it when it came out, and I remember at the beginning I was talking about how I was not a discerning consumer of RPGs, and at the time I was just like, "Oh, this is just like another cool, fun RPG." Like I don't really understand what's going on, but I often didn't. I didn't really understand what was going on in Earthbound, but that's not because of bad localization. I didn't really understand what was going on. So, and the game was given to me. It was my uncle who worked at a software store. He was like, do you want Tecmo Secret of the Stars or Killer Instinct? And I was like, I'll take the RPG. And I made a choice on that particular front. Made a choice. But I think that the thing that is interesting about Tecmo Secret of the Stars is it does some interesting things, and I'll talk about that. But it is sort of like one of like the endpoints of like you can't just throw out an RPG with a crappy, boring localization and combat that's not doing anything interesting and a story that's not doing anything interesting and expect it to be successful. It was actually originally made in 1993 in Japan, so we're getting it 2 years later, but like it looks ugly. It has poor sprite work, some kind of cool music, but totally uninteresting combat, totally uninteresting pretty much everything for the most part. And it's just it didn't move anything forward in a way that was meaningful. And so I think that's a good indicator of like you needed to start to do some things or push forward or perfect some things to expect a game to be successful. And that's not to say there aren't some interesting things about Tecmo Secret of the Stars. There actually is town building in Tecmo Secret of the Stars, which would have technically predated Breath of Fire 2. There are two different parties. The problem is one party is basically useless and they don't have anything to do except for like, we could walk through this door and you can't. Okay, I guess I'm taking this party instead, but it's a cool concept. So there are some conceptual things that are kind of cool there, but they're executed very badly. And it's just a boring, grindy game that cannot be forgiven for what it was anymore by the time that it comes out. Whereas I think all the rest of these games are doing interesting things that either move things forward or sort of perfect what has come before.
The way I phrased it when you mentioned you were bringing this was, I always really wanted to like this game because like this is one our rental store had. I rented it multiple times because I thought it was a cool idea. I love the idea of the two parties where it's like kind of the main family and then the like supporting cast and the like recruitable characters where you had like a roster of characters you could choose from in the second party. But the second party sucked. And if there's one thing that makes a grindy RPG even worse, it's having to grind two completely separate parties that you can't exchange between.
Yeah, that's tough. Like, I mean, any game where you like have to use a character that isn't good or you don't want to use, like, can be really tricky when you're like, oh, I have to use this person that I've never leveled up and has no equipment. And but to have a whole party of that sounds pretty tough.
Yeah. The
How for you guys that played this, like, where does this land? Like I don't want to just assume how the game is like tonally or how it plays just based on visuals, but like visually it's not dissimilar from like Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. It looks like it's going for
yeah.
like, baby's first RPG kind of thing. Although I think Mystic Quest did it well.
It absolutely is not baby's first RPG.
Yeah.
Oh,
No
okay.
way. I mean, I mean, like the story is whatever. Like, I don't even. It's unmemorable. But like, partially because of so the grind is real, but also like the localization is so poor and so plain that there will be like things where you have to like at some point. I remember you had to like go find like a gold needle or something. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it was to get a ship. And it was to progress the story, and there is no indication anywhere in the game whatsoever where that thing is. And I remember it was in like some behind some wall in some house that was totally out of the way in this out of the way town. And that was one of the many times that I called the Nintendo hotline, which very much is a 1995 thing. Uh,
Yes.
where I was
Yeah.
like, I don't know where to go or what to do. And my grandparents had already moved to Florida at that point. So, like, I couldn't ask them like I normally would have in the past. And yeah, it commits a variety of sins that would not ever be baby's first RPG. I actually like Mystic Quest, but this no.
Yeah, I feel like story wise, that's kind of the vibe it was going for, where it's this very like, you are the chosen hero to save the world, and you're part of the family lineage that will do this thing, and but the actual gameplay is very like, I mean, like you said, very grindy and not. There's not a lot you could do as far as strategy goes in a lot of cases. It's very much a you just have to grind and get stronger than them, which is not pleasant.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, Tecmo isn't really known for their RPGs. They were mostly known for making like action platformers and um,
Sports
I
sports
games.
did love their
games.
sports games. Oh, I
Yeah.
loved their sports games.
But they did have like an RPG on the NES called Radius Senki. which was actually directed and had the scenario written by Hideo Yoshizawa, who was the director of the Ninja Gaiden NES games, and that game is actually really good. But he left Tecmo between because Radio Sync came out in '91, and then in '93 he was working for Namco, so that that might be part of the problem is that he left the company and then they were still wanted to make another RPG and um, the rest of the team members at Tecmo were not that experienced in making them. But it's funny because then after this, they would go on to make Monster Rancher, which is a really interesting RPG series.
Yeah.
So like this is just like a kind of a blip for them. And it's a really bad time to release like a mediocre RPG because there were so many good ones on the Super Nintendo. So yeah, it's just funny how that kind of happened. I don't know if that might have played a role, like big creatives leaving and then you kind of have to work with what you got. But it's just funny how they kind of seemingly crapped out this very a game that's trying a lot of things but doesn't succeed at any of them. Right.
I mean, especially because there were so many interesting games coming out at the time that we never got. Like, what makes them choose? And I
Hmm.
realize it's different studios, right? But like, what makes them choose to localize this game? Whereas, I know that like the reason Enix didn't publish Dragon Quest 5 and 6 or is complicated, but you know what I mean. Like, just the choice to localize this of all things seems like an odd one to me.
Yeah, I mean, you almost makes you wonder, especially coming out so much later from the Japanese release, that like they noticed like RPGs were pretty popular on the Super Nintendo, and they thought, oh, well, we can, we have
We got
this
one of
one.
those.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, speaking of games that we didn't get for a while, that should have been localized probably at the time, Ben, I believe that you're going to talk about the start of one of your favorite series.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna talk about Sheeran the Wanderer, which came out very late in '95. I think December 1995 in Japan. And we wouldn't get any version of this game until I believe 2008 with the DS version, which is more of like a remake and is very mechanically different than the Super Nintendo original. But yeah, so this series originally started as a Dragon Quest spinoff with Torneko, um, which followed, the rogue-like adventures of Torneko from Dragon Quest IV. And then Chunsoft, the developers of that game, wanted to kind of expand on the mechanics of the series, the what would become the Mystery Dungeon series, and they wanted to do that with a property that they controlled. So that's where Shiren comes from. So it has more of a classic, like feudal Japan kind of aesthetic and setting, and it is a lot tougher than Tornico was. And then has a lot of things that they couldn't do because of the limitations of like the characters and vibe of Tornico and the Dragon Quest series in general. So, for example, one thing they wanted to add that Koichi Nakamura, the director of the game, has talked about is they wanted you to be able to find shops and dungeons and then steal items from the shops. But that wasn't something they could add to Tornico because Tornico is himself a merchant. And so he wouldn't steal from other merchants, was the idea. And it's very much inspired by Rogue, which is a old, computer RPG that had, um, kind of established the rogue like genres where the term comes from. And this, that Rogue had become pretty popular. It got adapted to Japanese PCs, and developers at Chunsoft have been playing it, and that's kind of how they got the idea for Tornico. And then they really wanted to adhere more closely to Rogue with the mechanics for Shiren. And Shiren is a very it's a there's a quote from an interview when they were talking about the DS version, when that finally came out in the US, where they said that the kind of mindset or ethos behind the series is tension and reason, which I think is a really good description of it, because you have the tension of starting from level one every time, when you enter a dungeon and having a blank inventory, having to deal with the items that you find in the dungeon, and the tension of when you die being reset all the way back to the beginning and having to start over. And then the reason of having to determine the best combinations of items that you find in the dungeon and the way to apply those items to the enemies and situations that you're put in. So if you've never played like a traditional roguelike, it's a turn-based game, has procedural generation for the maps. So the maps are, kind of randomized, and the enemy spawns and everything, and the items you get are always randomized. So every run is different, and the first main story dungeon in Shiren is about 30 floors, and then there's some post game dungeons that are 99 floors. So
Jeez.
yeah, to get through the main story dungeon isn't too difficult, but then those other dungeons can be very very difficult. And yeah, it's just a really, it would kind of start the whole mystery dungeon series, which would get adapted to a bunch of different franchises like Pokemon and Final Fantasy, and there'd be more Dragon Quest ones as well. But Shiren is the series that they have control over and that been able to iterate on, without having to cooperate with other companies' series. And so it's kind of the longest running, and the one that kind of, I think, has evolved the most mechanically over time. And it's really impressive how much this original release kind of has the foundations of the series, and it really holds up. I mean, it's a great game. If you like roguelikes, you got to play it.
I feel like it's interesting that we started off saying that, Earthbound had so much, you know, lasting impact, but it sounds like Sheeran, and I mean, knowing how many of the things in that carried over into what we can like the modern roguelike, which has definitely also been, popular in the last, I mean, ever since then, but especially in in the indie scene with things
Hmm.
like, I'm thinking like once they added the platforming elements, and in a lot of things like Spelunky, or
Hmm.
like Hades.
Hmm.
Um, but when you mentioned like being able to steal from the shops, I just had this brief moment of like the the Spelunky shopkeepers like coming at
Yeah.
you with the shotgun, and it like the whole like balancing that choice and the decision there, and how that's something that started with this, it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. And it's that's kind of a, not to get too into the weeds here, but a little bit of a bugbear for me. And I think people who are really into more what you would call like a traditional roguelike. And then a lot of the games now that are roguelikes are really more what I would call like a roguelite, because they don't often have, like, they're not turn based, right? In a lot of cases, the RPG mechanics even can be very minor if they're even there at all. And they use only the basis elements, right? Like you have like procedural generation, but and randomized like floor layouts and enemies maybe, and then randomized like power ups or upgrades. But you're maybe not starting from the beginning every time, or you're not, it just that it's morphed and evolved in a way that I think has become more approachable for people.
Yeah.
And that's really important and good, in a lot of ways. But Sheeran is much more adhering to that traditional structure of Rogue, where it is very much an RPG. It's turn based, and everything kind of operates on that system. And those, I think, are my favorite style of roguelike, because they allow for so much experimentation, and so many different scenarios and things that can crop up. And there's a lot of planning and strategy that goes into like your every move. Um, in a game like Sheeran, that you're not necessarily getting in something like Hades.
Oh yeah, definitely. They they
Yeah.
they are. I don't mean to misspeak. They are whole different beasts, but the inspiration, the starting point is definitely like
Hmm.
we wouldn't have Hades without Sheeran. It is a
Yeah.
different beast.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. I mean, Spelunky in particular, I think even though the genre of game is entirely different, it does have a lot of those like really core elements, like you're talking about with the shopkeepers, or just the kind of the structure and the like repeated runs, and it is very punishing, and you do have to kind of start over from the beginning and work with what you get in each dungeon, the same way you would in Sheeran. So yeah, I mean, you're totally right. Like we wouldn't have that kind of the preeminence of the like roguelike roguelite genre without it. And I think people are really discovering now, this kind of foundation of the Mystery Dungeon series that they kind of weren't able to access for a really long time in the West. Because now you're seeing a lot of indie games. Like there's a game that came out this year called House of Necrosis that's like a Resident Evil take on Mystery Dungeon, but it has very classic Mystery Dungeon, like turn based, grid based layout for the maps, but it uses like a Resident Evil theme, and it's so cool now to see like a lot of Western developers like iterate on this really core kind of concept that was set by the Sheeran series. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting for me because I have very little experience with rogue likes or lights or whatever. Um, to think about just how far back it goes. Like, obviously familiar with Tornico and things like that, but like to me, like roguelikes become a thing with things like, I don't know, Dead Cells or whatever.
Hmm.
And just to think about how far back that goes, and I think the same thing is true with like strategy RPGs at the same time, too, for me at least. Thinking about what sort of puts them on the map here and how long ago they really were a thing.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's true, and I think part of it too is like the critical reception for these style of games was really harsh in the West for a really long time. Like all the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games, for example, would get like really middling review scores, and even the Sheeran games that did come out here also kind of suffered from that. And I think people just weren't really ready for that style of game. Like it can be very punishing, and the idea of like losing progress, I think people were really um adverse to that. And but I think that indie games kind of embracing it and embracing, I think really what they hooked on is like the variety and the uniqueness of each run can really increase the longevity of a game. And I think when indie developers here really seized on that, people started to like really get into those kind of mechanics in a way that they kind of weren't able to before, and has enabled people to really appreciate games like this now in a way they couldn't before.
You saying that just made me wonder what the timeline is between uh the popularity of roguelikes and the release of Dark Souls.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean you're right, because it is, even though it doesn't have the roguelike structure, like the idea of like
The
dying
punishing
and
aspect, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and retrying and having to
Like
retrace your
people being
steps.
more finding that a more palatable or more acceptable
Yeah.
niche.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think you're right.
I unsurprisingly did not play this game either, so I'm enjoying the conversation. The closest I came to it was, again, thanks to my brother, playing Azure Dreams on the
Yes.
Mm.
PS1. He
Yes.
loved that game, and the concept of that kind of game, roguelike dungeon crawler, whatever, was new to us, and I was like, this is a really interesting idea, and he had a lot of fun with it. So I saw the appeal back then, but never really got into them at the time. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely, you can't understate the series' like importance and influence, especially
Yeah.
now. It's like we said earlier on with like Earthbound and how it influences more games now. Like I think this one had a more direct influence in it. Obviously the series and spin-offs have been ongoing, but I think they're finally at a point where like they're really, really more universally accepted and wanted.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, Azure Dreams is very mechanically similar in terms of the dungeon crawling to Sheeran and to the mystery dungeon games in general. But that game's cool because it added like there's like a dating, like persona style like dating element, and then also like a monster collecting element to it too.
Hmm.
Yeah, which I think that's kind of the, especially with mystery dungeon has crossed over with so many series, is like the foundations of this game and the format of the game is really amenable to like other types of mechanics and elements of other series like being combined with it. And I think that's part of why it has so much staying power too, is that you can take a lot of different elements from different games and then put it in this framework, and it works really well.
Mike and I might not have that much experience with the that genre, but there is one final game that I'm guessing most of our listeners, and certainly Mike and many of us, have a lot of experience with that also came out in the West in 1995. We've hinted at it earlier, and probably some listeners are waiting for it. So, Mike, what is our final game that we're going to have a full discussion about?
That would be Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. Still my favorite Yoshi
Well,
game.
One of the greatest RPGs of all time.
Just a masterpiece. Even with Baby Mario.
It is a masterpiece, Mike. I agree.
It's so good. But no, we should talk about Chrono Trigger. It's I'm gonna say it's fairly important. It's important to a lot of us, despite the fact that it's somehow unplayable on most modern console or any modern console for some reason that maybe we'll find out about at some point. But
It is on PC though, and that version's pretty good now.
yeah, I know. Like I'm surprised they haven't just ported that one over.
Yeah.
But
I bought it for like 70 cents at some point. I don't remember. It was a crazy,
Right?
some crazy sale for
yeah,
it.
I am glad. I'm glad it's there at least. Yeah, this one. Again, I mean, since we're talking about 95, I can't not reference like video game magazines, and there's a reason in this case especially. But boy, I followed every single word of this. Every time it was in any of the magazines I read, I was so excited about it. I mean, I was already a fan of Back to the Future, so I discovered my love of time travel stories, and I'm like, okay, so we got that. We got these, big names in RPGs at the time, like coming together. Who would have thought like Square and Enix would team up on a game? Uh, that'll never happen again. But it was such a big deal that all these people were coming together to do this. And I mean, even I look back at it now and I'm like, I don't know how that happened. Like that's still really impressive to me. But what an experience. In hindsight, I think I was a little too into it at the time because I got that game. I know I've told this story on, was it a quiz show on some a retro before, but I got that game, and when it came out, there was like a mini walkthrough in EGM, I think it was at the time, and I was like, I am not going to put this game down. And I didn't even usually follow walkthroughs, but I'm just like, I want to like play this game and I don't want to stop. So I did sit down when I got the game and play it from beginning to end in one sitting. I mean, I used the bathroom, but because of this little mini walkthrough, which maybe I shouldn't have done, but it makes for a good story. Because I was so into it. Although one thing before getting it was that this game was horrendously expensive. I don't know if it was everywhere. I don't know if GameStop or Software Etc. at the time was just charging more, but like you couldn't buy certain games anywhere. You couldn't just go into Target or whatever. But this came out and I was like, okay, it's $85 when all the other games on the Super Nintendo were generally $50. It wasn't $100 like Phantasy Star 4, but it was still expensive. And my mom was like, look, if you can find the money for it, that's fine. But she's like, I'm not paying $85 for this game. So I remember walking in there with a paper grocery bag filled to the top with trade-ins, games. We might have even traded in our Super Scope for it. I'm not sure we should have done that, but just everything. I was like, I don't absolutely need to trade in to knock like $60 off of that. So I gave away everything I could to play this game, and it's still one of the best I've ever played. Until I played Clair Obscur, I would say it's the best I've ever played. Now I'm having trouble. Zach said much how Zach has said enough how it's like your favorite game now, and I'm like, oh, shoot, I don't know. I have to reevaluate, but whatever.
It's a good one.
It's in the top 2 or 3. Like the visuals are beautiful. The music, of course, is just fantastic. I mean, right now at the end of 2025, we just got a new like piano arrange album from Square on this, and I think there's another album or something coming out next month. Like it's the music. It just continually, it's just still there. It's still popular. It keeps being adapted unofficially and officially. I love the story. The characters are also charming. The battles, the tech system. I don't know. I don't want to just sit here and talk about everything because there's three other people that need to talk too. But I just never tire of this game, and like everything is so perfectly polished. Just a good experience, like from beginning to end, except for that one part of the prehistoric area with that song that drones on. But besides that,
Yeah, Chrono Trigger is interesting because to me, like it certainly it advances the genre in some ways. Not that are totally unique. I mean, obviously, like enemies on the field was a thing that was around, but it sort of gets popularized, I think, partially by Chrono Trigger. Although the way they do enemies in the field in Chrono Trigger is again maybe a slight knock because you can't avoid them most of the time. But it's sort of a culmination of, and it makes sense, you know, the two masters of the JRPG come together to create it. It's as you said, it's such like a perfect distillation of what the genre had been working towards.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It brings so many different things together. It's not overly complicated in any way. It's certainly an easy enough thing to go down, but it just so perfect in so many ways. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think that maybe one of the most important things that it does is Mitsuda in terms of moving forward and like having a little bit more flexibility in what video game music can sound like and how melodic it can be and things like that. And what he's able to do with his Super Nintendo sound chip is just incredible. And I think that ends up becoming maybe its most important influence. Again, we discussed earlier on how people want to copy Chrono Trigger, but it never works. And yeah, it's such a it's such a perfect 1995 RPG.
yeah, I think, and I'm just like realizing this because we talked about enemies in the field, like on Earthbound and stuff. I think the key, and obviously, if someone, Ben, if you know of a game that did this before specifically, I think the key for me in this game is that it wasn't just that they were on the field, but like you do the battle right there. Like
Yeah.
you can see them, but you don't go to another area, which I thought was always thought was really interesting. I mean, now you see that more, but you did not at the time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, there's a few games on the NES that like, but they're not like traditional RPGs like that. Like, I think there's a strategy RPG where all the battles are on the field, but it's not the
Oh,
same. Like the level of presentation that you get from Chrono Trigger, where the characters kind of just jump out into their positions and the enemies come in, and there's nothing really that had done it like that before. And yeah, I mean, I think that that is a huge thing. And I mean, just the presentation in general of the game, the visuals, the music. I think the thing that stands out about this game to me, and I only played it about 4 years ago with the PC release. That was my first experience with it. Is the pacing of the game. Like there's no moment really wasted. The game is not like that long. Like you would think, oh, this is like a bunch of like Rockstar game developers coming together to make this game. You'd think it might be bloated with like so many different mechanics and so many different elements, but it's so tightly paced and compact, and you can finish it in like 20-25 hours. And I think that's like its greatest strength really, is that it's just so tightly designed and paced, and it never drags, and it's always, but it doesn't feel rushed either. Like all the character moments are given enough time to breathe, and they let you sit with like some of the more impactful story moments enough for them to matter, but they don't waste any time. Like that's the thing I think that RPGs really could learn from Chrono Trigger, and most games really haven't still learned.
Yep.
I mean, we're still in an era of like 50, 60, 70 hour RPGs. Like, God, I wish the Persona team would take a note from this
the
game
number
and
of
maybe cut back a little bit
yeah, the
because,
number of games that
yeah.
have just like one too many characters so that you don't get the time to focus on all of them, or just don't put enough, like put one too many things in that you're now jumping through that one extra hoop trying to, hit all the buttons and get all the things. You're right. It's like it's really well balanced as far as how it uses that, where it's not too big, it's not too small. It's It's right in the Goldilocks zone.
Hmm. Yeah.
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 I mean, it's not something that we get to say about a lot of games. You know, so many RPGs where it's like, well, you know, they use it as a selling point. It's like you have a minimum of 100 hours, but it could be 180 if you do everything. And
Right?
I know that they want that to be a positive thing, but I just feel like I don't mean to just like say, you know, how I feel, but like I feel like I see the commentary so much from like, you know, you guys or anyone like where it's like, no, I don't want the minimum on everything to be 100 hours.
I don't
I
have
think
time to do that.
no, like have it optional. That's fine. I mean, you know, we talked about Claire Obscure. Like that's literally this morning I was like sort of just trying to sell someone on the site about it. It's like, no, it's like you can finish the game in like 30 hours. Like it's very good about its pacing in that way, just like Chrono Trigger was. And if you want to spend more time, you can, but you don't. You know, all these other games where the main story is like 70 or more. It's like you have to commit to that level to just see the story through. And I'm like, that's a big ask, especially if you know it's not drawing you in enough to do that.
Well, it's
So
And
really hard to sustain narrative, and I think just not just narrative, but also like presentational quality and the pacing and the drive and motivation to play the game across that much of time. And I think like some games are able to do that if they're really replayable or they mechanically there's a lot to get into, can do that. But I think if a game is more focused on like the story or the narrative elements, like dragging it out across that much time, like it's so hard for any media to really achieve that and maintain quality. And I just think this game really understands like you don't need all that. Like it was trying to be the best RPG of all time, right? Like the magnum opus RPG for the Super Nintendo. And it doesn't need to be this insane bloated thing to do that, right? And I think that is just so the thing that makes it so timeless, um, is that they didn't waste anything, you know.
right, like you have the back, not even half, but the back section of the game that is optional. You know, you can choose to it's funny to think that some of those things are optional, but you know you don't have to do them. But otherwise it's just it's not filled with like so much filler and side quests, except for the DS one where they added that weird new area that is just a bunch of fetch quests and side quests, and it's like, oh no, like this game didn't need that. And like
Hmm.
it's
yeah,
almost, well, I'm not saying the game is worse for it, but like it wasn't necessary. It really didn't add anything.
I mean, and there
But it was
is
a good reminder.
unnecessary.
Yeah.
There is a bunch of unnecessary stuff in there that you could do, both the side quest stuff that you were just mentioning, and how many endings does the game have? Like,
I used to know that. Is it 13?
I think it's I was gonna say 12 or 14, so 13 is probably about right.
Yeah.
Um, like I had I had at one point a file on that game or of Chrono Trigger that was all characters at level 99 with maxed out stats, and I
Wow.
had gone through every ending. Like, you can put time into it if you really want to. It's pointless because you can beat the game at like level 30, but
I mean, New Game Plus was
Yeah,
but it
that's
again,
had a
also
new
a
game
thing that it
plus.
brings. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
and a
never seen
reason
that
for it.
before. Yeah. Hmm.
Like beating Lavos with just Chrono is
Yeah.
very beginning of the game is a lot harder than it seems like it should be, even when you're level 99 with ridiculous stats.
Yeah, I was never able to pull that off.
Yeah, and I think too, Chrono Trigger, like the other thing that it does really well, other than the pacing, is that it's very accessible, without sacrificing like depth or engagement with the mechanics. And like I think that's why the game is so enduring and like why it's on so many top RPG lists and things like that. And I think the game is really great. I don't think it's the best RPG of all time, but I think that the reason why so many people say it is because it can appeal to people who wouldn't normally get into the genre for all the reasons that the genre kind of pushes people away or puts people off or why they don't finish things, finish RPGs. It doesn't have any of those problems. but it's also not like too easy or too, it's not dumbed down really. And I think that, it hits this really broad audience without sacrificing what makes it like engaging and fun, and that's so hard to do. Like I think it's really hard to do now with games. Like you still see games like trying to aim for a broader audience, and they do that by like dumbing things down or whatever. And this game really manages to get people, so many different people, into RPGs that otherwise wouldn't play them, and that's huge, and maybe the most important thing about the game these days, right? Is that like so many people are like, oh yeah, I could. They played Chrono Trigger and liked it, so they would give other RPGs a try, and I think that that's really important.
Yeah, I never thought about that at the time, just because I was used to RPGs. But I think you really got something there. These days, so many developers are focused on like, it's like, well, we'll give you a tutorial, or we'll like throw something up on the screen that says, hey, press this to open your map, and we'll show you exactly where to go. If you've like spent more than like 3 minutes doing something else. um I understand why they're doing it, but I'm like, it's just too heavy handed most of the time. Like, I think this.
Chrono Trigger didn't need it.
Yeah,
Right. They
yeah.
figured out a way to make it approachable without like just being like, do this. Here's a list of your
Hmm.
things. Here's the time you need to do them.
Hmm. Yeah,
I think the
absolutely.
relatively small scale of the game too. Like they think about that opening continent, and it's relatively small. There's not a lot of places to go, and it opens, it expands, and contracts in ways as it's going that sort of again like make it to where you can just sort of access the game consistently as you go.
Yeah.
I mean, like even the world map, there's not a very large world map in that game. It just feels bigger because they like give you this slightly wider space with the same number of little dots on it and then give you like 5 copies of it that are all very unique and different.
Yeah, Chrono Trigger's pretty good, I guess. It's
I
pretty good.
guess.
It's no
Yeah.
secret of this. Oh, sorry. Tecmo Secret of the Stars.
Yeah, get it right. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Show some respect.
The cover art obviously better on Secret of the Stars. Oh man, I love the cover art, Chrono Trigger. It's so good.
Oh well,
Um,
Toriyama, rest in peace. Like,
Indeed, indeed. Well, I'm glad that we sort of ended our conversation with Chrono Trigger because it's such a. I mean, obviously, I don't have anything new to say about it. It's good. But before we leave, I do want to very quickly go through what I'll call like sort of the lightning round, which is just us shouting out games that came out in '95 that we aren't going to spend more than a minute on for each one that we think deserve some recognition as being part of 1995's general vibe. And we'll go through a few of them. However many we go through is fine. I want to very quickly talk about a game that I considered bringing, which was Secret of Evermore, which I think is a really cool, interesting game. I know at the time sort of the conversation was like, oh, we're not getting Seiken Densetsu 3 because instead we're going to get this American version of it. But like the time travel element of Secret of Evermore is really cool. I like the combat in it. I think is pretty interesting. I like the sort of contemporary setting of the kid who's sort of the main character in it. It's sort of aesthetically interesting. I mean, it's not like, again, I think that Trials of Mana or Seiken Densetsu 3 is a much better game, but I'm glad that Secret of Evermore exists. I just think it's really interesting.
Yeah, like it was so easy to be like, well, I wanted this other thing, but you're giving me this. But if you take that away, like I had a lot of fun with it. I enjoyed the different areas you went into. That it was really fun just seeing your dog transform. Obviously, the toaster dog was my favorite, but
Excellent.
um,
Absolutely.
yeah. It was
The
so hard.
alchemy
Just
magic system.
yeah, like it was just unfortunate that the game had that weighing over it when it's like, well, that's not exactly the case. So I didn't think it got a fair shake, but I enjoyed it a lot too.
I'll jump in and say one of the games I was thinking about was Ogre Battle March of the Black Queen, which came out on Super Nintendo in the US in '95. Uh, not an accessible game. That would be a good intro to
No.
RPGs.
No, I don't think I got through the first fight in that game. I tried.
Yeah. I So the biggest thing for me that one introduced me to was it has a really in-depth class system that I really enjoy. I've talked about in a few other retro episodes. And like we were talking earlier about Shining Force, the idea of like changing classes and seeing the upgrades and stuff like that. And Ogre Battle definitely brings that. When I was a kid, I mostly just I can't remember what the password was offhand now, but there was a password you could enter to do like this single special battle where it gave you like a full army that you could start with, and then you could adjust it and do the special battle. And I did that more than I actually played the real game, but still really cool.
Yeah, and it was kind of giving people who were only playing on console kind of a PC like strategy kind of experience that was not as common on something like the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
And I think but with the same depth and complexity to it. And obviously, I mean, I'm a big Yasume Matsuno fan, and so I love Ogre Battle. I think it's great. And it's a great place to start. With your Matsuno, if you're delving into his games and um, the games of like Quest in general, that's it's kind of the start of that world and universe and everything that he was working with. So it's a great game. Yeah.
I want to throw out one that is like tricky because we didn't get it in 1995, but it'd be weird to not at least briefly mention Terranigma, just because of its history and how beloved it is, and how it came out somewhere in 1995. If that's eligible for today's discussion.
Sure, why not?
I mean, I wish it came out here in 1995. No, I mean, I mean, I think we all know this, but I'm a big fan of Soul Blazer. I like Illusion of Gaia, but Terranigma was you could see like certain gameplay elements being like refined each game, and I really really enjoyed that one. I don't even remember when I played it. Been a while, but really just so satisfying. Great music. I enjoy the characters, and just I do like that all of those games had this idea of restoring or building the world, but all in a different way each time. So they all feel unique in that concept, even though they're in some ways going for the same thing.
Yeah. I want to mention just a couple other Game Gear RPGs that I considered talking about, but didn't end up picking. But there's a Sylvan Tale, which is like a 2D Zelda style game that was on the Game Gear. Really great music, really great visuals. It's pretty short and sweet. You can finish in about 4 hours, but just a really fun, interesting game. And then also, there's a game called Royal Stone, which we did get the previous game, the first game in the series, Crystal Warriors. But Royal Stone is a sequel to that game. It's a strategy RPG, and it really just kind of improves. The story is a lot more interesting. The mechanics are a lot more refined. Which we never got here, but if you can, hunt down the fan translation, that's a great one to play too if you like strategy RPGs.
I can't think of. I mean, there are some others that probably deserve mentioning, but I haven't played. Like Popful Mail, I think it's an interesting one. Working Designs, Beyond Oasis, which apparently is a really cool Sega game. We got Shining Force CD here, which I hear is one of the better ones. I mean, it's a lot of stuff. I mean, '95 was a great year.
Tales of
Ease
Fantasia.
5. Oh yeah,
T-
Tales. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
yeah, Tales of Fantasia. Yeah,
yeah. And Ease 5 on the Super Famicom is not the best Ease game, but it's an interesting one.
Is Unless I have the wrong date, Lufia 2 was 95, wasn't it?
'95 in Japan,
Oh, okay.
'96.
Okay.
I mean, if
Yeah.
you think there's any chance in hell that we would just have an episode where
With Zach
Lucas
and I both on
could
this.
bring Lufia 2 and he would not bring Lufia 2.
Just making
Or
sure.
me.
I have one more just to throw it out there. It's actually not an RPG. It's a point and click adventure that Hillary and I just learned about yesterday. Frankenstein Through the Eyes of the Monster, a 1995 point-and-click RPG,
Oh
FMV
God.
starring Tim Curry.
Oh,
Have not played it.
okay.
I have not played it, but
Excellent.
there's a long play on YouTube, but it's only a 2-hour video, and I'm like, it has to be good, right? It at least has to be entertaining. No, like I don't want to
That
play
one.
it, but I want to see
Entertaining,
Tim
yes.
Curry. Yes.
Well, that's a good place to end off because I'm not even interested in point and clicks, but you say Tim Curry and Frankenstein, I'm there and I'm interested. So yeah, very good.
You'll have to share
Well,
that long play.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll thank the three of you, so much for coming along. I thought that conversation went really well, and I'm looking forward to repeating it again next year, where we look at 1996, and Lucas will get to bring Lufia 2.
I'll be there.
Yeah. So let's talk about what's coming up next. In 2 weeks, and I announced this on the last episode, we are going to have 2 episodes in a row on 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim, which is a Vanillaware game, which I have wanted to play basically since it came out, and I've been sort of looking for the opportunity to do so, and now here we are. So I'm really looking forward to that. After that, I don't know yet. I have to make some decisions about what we're going to do after that. But if you have any ideas, feel free to shoot me an email. Which, speaking of, if you want to get in touch with me, you can email us retro@rpgfan.com. You can also find RPG Fan on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, Blue Sky, Twitch, YouTube. Usually is RPG Fan or RPG Fan.com. We also have a Discord. We also have a shop hosted by TeePublic, where you can buy like t-shirts, mugs, things like that. I was looking, and there's no particular reason that I might be looking for this, Mike, but I don't think they have onesies on there anymore, which made me very sad. As I couldn't find any on there. There used to be some on there. But high quality stuff, very worth checking out. We also have 2 other fine podcasts. Random Encounter, which is every 2 weeks, every other Monday, hosted by Jono, usually about current events. I think the next episode, as of the publication of this, will probably be the year in review, but I don't know. My math might be off on that. And we also have Rhythm Encounter about RPG music every other Monday, and it is usually hosted by you, Mike. So what have you guys done recently? What's coming up on Rhythm Encounter?
I'm sorry, what do you mean they got rid of the onesies? I really wish they would tell me that before they mess with my shop. I had no idea.
I don't think they're there anymore.
No, they're not.
I did look.
That was one of my favorite things to promote, and we've literally actually sold several of them.
Yeah, I thought it was strange.
Okay,
it's such a particular thing.
I know. Okay. Anyway, so Rhythm Encounter, our recent episode, I had a very, very handsome and special guest, Zach Wilkerson, and some others to talk about Clair Obscure recently. Definitely go check that one out. Coming up next, we are doing, I'm not going to say the Icelandic version because I will butcher it, but it is the Yule Book Flood. It's an Icelandic tradition where you read books on Christmas Eve. So we're doing music and book pairings. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So that's coming up soon.
Excellent. And if you want to review us, we're on Apple Podcasts, Overcast, YouTube, Spotify, pretty much. Obviously, you're listening to us, you know where to find us. You can also review us there. And if you want to get in touch with the individual panelists, let's tell them how they can do that, starting with you, Mike.
Easiest way for me is mike@rpgfan.com. I'm technically in the Discord. I might show up in the podcast channel, so you might see me there.
Excellent. And Lucas?
You can find me on pretty much all of the social media still for some reason. At Raefgal, RAEFGALL. And you can find me over on YouTube. I do Let's Plays and currently playing through Final Fantasy Tactics.
Perfect. And Ben?
Yeah, you can email me at benloganlove@gmail.com.
Perfect. And if you want to get in touch with me personally, ZachW@RPGFan.com is good. And I'm also on our Discord as ZachW, and I'm a little better about checking that now because I'm on Discord for some other things now. So again, thank the 3 of you so much for coming along, talking about these 8 or 15, I don't know how many games we ended up talking about games. I'm looking forward to talking to some of you again in a year, if you want to come along again, of course. And thank you, listeners. Good night and good luck.